Everyone wants to live an inspired life, yet so many people search for happiness following the footsteps of peers and taking advice from people who have different values and outcomes to which they're searching. There are people born into wealth, graduated from the best universities in the world, and there are people who have none of that and yet are living extraordinary lives full of fulfillment and reward. The purpose of this podcast is to share insights and strategies that allow you to question the status quo and think freely, so you can design your life and be who you want to be. We get one life. Time is our most valuable asset. I believe that when we're free and able to focus on meaningful work, we become better human beings. This is Always Free, and I'm your host, Jason Graystone.
Welcome to the leading podcast for financial empowerment and wealth creation. Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can connect with Jason on social media and subscribe to the Jason Graystone YouTube channel for weekly videos. Don't forget to also subscribe to the weekly newsletter to receive frequent educational content and action steps to help you design your life so you can be who you want to be. For news on all future events and updates, go to jasongraystone.com.
Well, welcome back to the podcast, guys. I hope you had a good week so far. If this is the first time you're listening, this is the #1 podcast for financial empowerment and wealth creation. And if this is the first episode you're listening to, definitely go back to episode 1, because I've taken you on a journey from episode 1, sharing all the strategies in order of what I did from the age 21 to 29. So you'll get a lot of value if you go back there and start at #1. And this episode in particular, we're in for a real treat because I've got a friend of mine, Ryan Scribner, who's come on the show. And me and Ryan have known each other for quite a few years now. I actually went over to New York and spent some time with him to do an interview on his channel a few years back, maybe 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago. And what we were talking about there was essentially my advice if you wanted to get into speculation to kind of accelerate that run to financial freedom. Because if you go and watch that video, you'll see that I spoke about that was the last piece in the puzzle for me so that I could achieve complete freedom. And there was many other bits to the puzzle before that. And Ryan has some expertise and knowledge in investing and stocks. And the great thing about Ryan's story is he's really focused on freedom. And that's really what this podcast is all about. It's not about the scratching and the clawing and the competing and the hustling and the products and plant equipment and all that kind of stuff. It's about freeing up your time. And if you could just have a bit more money, but it'd require more effort, I'm sure he'd rather have less money, right? And have more free time. And that's really, you guys listening to this podcast, I know you resonate with that. And that's really what it's all about. So welcome, Ryan, to the podcast. Thanks for coming on, mate.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's great to catch up with you. Yeah, I think that was probably 2018 when we met up in New York City and shot that video in that very loud construction site. You remember that with all those It was really funny because we're trying to shoot this interview and we booked this really cool place to film this video. It's like a Saturday afternoon, and right down at the street, they're like jackhammering the sidewalk. We're like, really, on a Saturday while we're filming an interview? But we made it work. It ended up working out for us.
It was a cool video. And when they weren't jackhammering, it was the police sirens, typical New York, eh?
I know. Yeah. Very funny timing.
So, Ryan, before we get right into the nitty gritty, tell people a little bit about what you do these days, what you're up to nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would call myself, I guess, or what people call me is a professional affiliate marketer. That's like the bread and butter of my business. And so I have 2 main platforms where I do affiliate marketing, and that's the blog that I co-own, which is investingsimple.com. And then I'm also big on my YouTube channel, which is just Ryan Scribner on YouTube. And essentially, if I were to explain what I do in like an elevator pitch, is I'm super passionate about money, finance, and investing. And I've essentially figured out ways to help people learn the ins and outs of investing and make a great living in the process by basically generating referrals for different brokerages and investing platforms.
Awesome. So when you was a youngster and you just come out of school, what did you do then? What was that like? What was your life like when you came out of school?
Yeah, so for a while, I'm going to be honest with you, I had like the financial scarcity mindset, because I came from a middle-class upbringing. And then when I was 15, my parents got divorced. Both of my parents had to downsize into smaller houses. And I went right from that middle class lifestyle to that lower class lifestyle of, clipping coupons with my mom, and we were buying food with food stamps and had the government assistance. And so I had a taste of both worlds there. But I definitely had that mindset of financial scarcity of, money is a very scarce resource. You have to be careful with your money. You don't want to risk it. And so when I went into college, I looked at it strictly from a financial standpoint. And I was like, okay, what's the least amount of money I can spend to make the most coming out of college? And so what I found that to be was getting involved in the electrical trade. So I went to my community college, got a degree in electrical construction, and right out of school, I got a job for my local power utility. And so my college education, I was fortunate enough to have $10,000 set aside for my grandfather to put towards that, and that paid for most of my college. I just had to chip in a little bit of money for books and tools and things like that. So I invested a very small sum of money, about maybe $12,000 total in 2 years of my time, which allowed me to come out of school debt-free and get a job where I could make, above average income. So I ended up getting this job as a past due bill collector at my local power utility. So I was basically paid to go door to door and collect money from people who owed money to the power utility. And if they didn't have the money, I would shut their power off. So as I'm sure you can imagine, that was like my dream job. It was so fulfilling. I had people blowing cigarette smoke in my face and swearing at me and dogs chasing me. But at that point, my goal was, hey, I want to spend as little as possible, make as much as possible. So I was debt-free, living at home, and making, at the time, a salary of around, I think it was like $60,000. Now, the good thing is I didn't stay in that job too long. After I was in that position for 8 months, I was able to bid into a better position, which was actually utilizing my college education. It paid better, and I wasn't being chased by people and, dealing with all that confrontation. So I ended up in the utility planning department, where I would do the preliminary design work for utility work. So if somebody was trying to tie into the power grid, I would go out there and figure out how to serve them. And that job paid a little bit better. I was making like $65,000 with a little bit of overtime. It was closer to 70. And so by what most people's terms are, I, had it made. That's what everybody told me all the time, because I was 20 years old, making $70K, no college debt, minimal expenses. And so I was saving and investing a boatload of money. But what I found pretty much immediately once I started that job, within the first couple of weeks, I knew this was not sustainable for me long term, because it had nothing to do with my passion of teaching people and also money. And it was just so out of alignment with my values, because it was kind of, I don't know if what the equivalent is of a labor union in the UK, but over here it's yep. People, you're protected by this union, and you can pretty much screw off all day, be lazy, complain. Same. Yeah, you do nothing, and you can do no wrong, and it's very hard to get fired. And a lot of people think that's good, but like that's kind of a very permeating mindset. And
it's a bubble, right? It's a cushion.
It's a bubble. It's like a separate ecosystem. Everyone complains while meanwhile they're making, 6-figure income and getting this crazy overtime. And that really does start to like take an effect on your life. And so I just knew, I was like, man, this is not sustainable long-term. And so I at the time had a lot of surplus income coming in, because like I said, I was driving this beat up old SUV. I was living with my mom, still renting one of the houses or one of the bedrooms in the house. They're paying her like $500 towards rent and groceries. So like my expenses were minimal, and I was making this $70,000 salary. So I was dumping thousands of dollars into the market. And it's funny because my dad is a financial advisor. And so when I had my first $5,000 saved up, I reached out to him. I was like, hey, can you invest this money for me? And so he set me up in a bunch of mutual funds. And I remember about 6 months later, I log into the account and my $5,000 had grown into like $5,084. And I was like, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. $84. I was like, screw that. That's ridiculous. I called my dad. I'm like, I need my money back. I'm going to do something else with this. And at the time, I thought I was going to become this swing trader. So I was studying the strategies of swing trading. I literally it became like an obsession. So like I was going to work, going home, I'd go to the gym, and then I would literally go to this coffee shop near my house and spend 2 to 3 hours a night just reading and then studying charts. And I finally, after months of doing that, decided to give it a shot with a $500 trading account, very little money. And what I found with swing trading is that I just could not get to the point where I was predictably profitable. I'd have a couple of trades where I would do well, and then I would screw up on the next one. And I actually didn't lose any money. What I found is that I took one of those bank ledgers that you can get from like Staples where you can write, transactions. Yeah. And I logged every single one of my trades. So I wrote when I bought and what I sold for. And I'm sure there's an automated way to do this, but I was just looking to do it on paper. And I remember looking at my brokerage account and I had like the same $500 in there. Maybe I was up 10 or 20 bucks. And I looked at this gigantic list of all of these trades I had placed. And I was like, man, that's a lot of effort spent to make no money. And I was like, all right, I do know people who are successful with trading, but at that point I said, I don't think this is for me. And that's when I was learning more about, the long-term style of investing, the more Warren Buffett-esque style of investing. But it's funny because at the time, I was doing a lot of learning on my own and with the stock market and with these different types of investing. And I remember at one point I went on YouTube and I was trying to look up some information about, investing in the stock market for beginners. And I was finding that there wasn't a heck of a lot of information out there, but what was out there had a lot of views. And so for me, that was like the light bulb in the head moment where I said, I should take some of this information that I'm learning in these books and from my own experience and make some videos for YouTube. And that was back in 2016. And that's pretty much where the inception of my channel was. But the interesting thing to me is that I really started this channel as a passion project because I had, decent money coming in from my job. And I just wanted an outlet for creativity and something that made me feel like I was actually like making a difference because I didn't get that from my job. I was looking for that source of fulfillment. And so that was my YouTube channel. But little did I know that was going to become this massive passive income business that would accelerate my wealth to tenfold. But starting out, I literally had no intentions of even making money from this channel.
I often say that it's very rare for people to go in and make money purely from a zero-sum business. They normally end up, even if you're a sports player, even if you're like a golfer or a boxer, you end up doing promotions and campaigns and advertising, and that's serving people, right? Because if you're sitting there just looking at charts all day and numbers, and as you say, it's just as unfulfilling as being in the union, right? It's not much different. You're not helping anyone. So there's this burning desire to help and feel meaning and feel fulfilled. So what I'm interested in is, why do you think you had such a fascination and a passion for money? Is there something that was missing when you was younger, or did it come from, where did that come from?
It's funny because I actually don't know where it came from, but I'll talk about like my childhood a little bit. And it's funny because people who meet me and who have met my parents, I was funny. The other day I was hanging out with a friend of mine who has met my mom before, and then he met my dad, and he was like, where the heck did you come from? Because you're not like your dad and you're not like your mom. And like, I think I have a very serious demeanor. So I usually get people asking me like, oh, is your dad in the military? Is your dad, a police officer? And like, I don't have any of that in my family, which is funny because I don't know. I have no idea where this, serious demeanor and then this strong desire for money came from. But I really am the first one in my family to go off and kind of carve a different path down the road of deriving money from something outside of just a 9-to-5 job. But I can remember, I was always fascinated with money when I was a kid. Like I can remember one time I was like 7 or 8 years old, and I set up a blanket fort in my living room, and I bought a bunch of it was like those things it's like those trays with the drawers, little plastic ones, and I opened up a bank, and I asked all of my family members to let me hold their money for them. And I, at the time I said, here's what I'm going to do. You give me $20 and I just want, 25 cents a day to hold on to your money. And then my dad was like, actually, you have to pay us to hold on to the money, because he was explaining how banks worked. And I was like, what? That doesn't make any sense. So like that, I don't know, that's one of my earliest memories about money.
Really cool.
When I was 14, I started a little lawn mowing business in my neighborhood, and, pushed my dad's push mower up and down the street, and had a couple of different clients. And then when I was 15, that's when I first got into the JOB, the just over broke. Got a job working for a grocery shop doing bagging. And then I worked for a clothing retailer for a while. But pretty much from age 14 to when I was 22, 23, when I left my job, I was working in one way or another. And I was always so interested in money and having money and working on stuff. I was like always just into this idea of having money and having working towards something. But, until I shifted from that JOB mindset of making somebody else rich or just trading my time for money, it really didn't get me that far. My wealth has accelerated substantially by getting out from behind that method of earning income. And it starts with this, and as much as people don't like to hear that, it really does start with your mindset and the way that you look at money and your relationship with money and your mindset around it. And it's just like crazy to me how, if you were to talk to someone about, hey, how would you make $100,000 this year? They're going to tell you a job that pays $100,000 as a salary. And so based on, the schooling system, everyone is so conditioned to trade their time for money. And if you want to make more money, go to school and go into a larger amount of debt and then get a higher paying salary. And until that shift occurred for me, that was my school of thought as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so many people's school of thought, right? I think that's one of the reasons that we do such a lot of work on mindset, because it's decisions that you make, and it's not going for the short-term gratification. It's just sometimes it's just, plucking some low-hanging fruits, but then going for exponential growth, which can take a little bit longer. But, with time as the objective, and you're giving yourself permission to work towards having more time and not keeping up with the Joneses and not showing off and all this kind of stuff before you're ready for it, it takes a lot of courage, because we're surrounded by masses of people that are all doing that. So absolutely, mindset's important. So when I love what you said about the YouTube and sharing and sharing what you've learned, because you genuinely got a passion for money, and you're learning the stuff and you're teaching the stuff as you're learning it, right? I see a lot of people thinking they've got to know everything about everything before they go and share stuff. And I always relate back to the story from Catch Me If You Can, where he basically cons everyone into thinking he's a teacher. And when they caught him, they said, how did you blag a college to teach for a whole semester? And he just said, I just had to read one chapter ahead of the students, and that's it, right? And although I'm not saying you should be a fraud or a fake or a phony, if you've got a genuine passion for something, you can share what you're learning. And I think people really buy into that anyway, don't they? They love the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something people get so caught up in too, is like, what is expertise? What does it mean to be an expert? And at the time, I'm going to be honest, I did a lot of research. I knew a lot about investing, more than probably 90% did, but in many ways I was doing exactly what you said, just staying one step above or ahead of my students. So I was learning, reading, The Intelligent Investor and different books. I was taking my notes, and I was taking those notes and putting them into these little informative videos on my whiteboard. And so you really don't need to be like an expert at something. You can be an expert in different ways too. And I think people think that if you're trying to do something, you have to be like this 20-year veteran at it. But I actually encourage people to look at expertise in different ways. Like, a lot of people value watching somebody going through the journey. Like, for example, let's say somebody is 250 pounds and they want to get down to 150 pounds. They could record themselves through that journey of, hey, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to have successes and failures. I'm going to have roadblocks, but I'm going to do a series of documenting losing 100 pounds. That person is not an expert at losing weight, but they're going to share with that audience the pain points, the ups and the downs, and that's tremendously valuable. Yeah. Whereas, I think a lot of people think, oh, you have to be this dietitian and this weight loss expert, to share your message with the world, and you don't. And I mean, I don't have a degree in finance. My degree is in electrical construction, and I've been featured in the Wall Street Journal. That's so kind of silly to me, or in Business Insider, because I understood that, you don't need this credential behind you to have valuable information. And most of the videos that I share are these very basic concepts of assets versus liabilities and how to get your first credit card and things like that, that really, it's not rocket science. It's really quite basic information.
But you can tell that you've done all the work and you've read the books, you've researched the thing, and you've put a lot of effort into going and deliver that, and people respect that. And you're very honest about, I've just learned this, this might not be right, it might not be for you, but it's what I've found out. The dogs are barking. But ultimately, what you're doing by doing that is you're showing every side of yourself. So there's no way, I mean, what I see a lot of people who are trying to be, this kind of false pretense and be the best and everything's great and they know everything, they stand to fall the furthest, right? Because as soon as there's a saying, right? Never meet your heroes, because you kind of have them on this pedestal and you look up to them, and if anything goes wrong and they, and you see in something in them that actually you didn't believe was there, or you was too blind to see was there, they fall, right? And it's like, oh no, they're this terrible person. They don't know this, they don't know that. Whereas if you show both sides all the time from the start, you're in for a winner. It's simple as that. I
completely agree with that. And so for example, a couple of weeks ago, I was just dabbling and I put like $1,000 or it's like $500 into some options contracts. Never traded options before. And I said, you know what? I'm going to just shoot a video about this. And I shot a quick video talking about what I bought and like why I did it. And in that video, I was like, hey guys, I am not an expert at options. I have been reading about them for a couple days and I'm going to give it a shot and I'm going to see what happens. So like, I don't go out there acting like I'm an expert at options or some of these different things. I'm simply like I'm like that person on that weight loss journey where I'm like, hey, I'm trying this out. This could go well. This could not go well. And my first options trade, I doubled my money, which was cool. But then, I had that hot hand fallacy, put it into some other options, and now I'm down like 70% on that. So like I did a recent video where I talked about that. I said, hey, I doubled my money on my first options, put them into this garbage, and now I'm down 70%. So I'm probably never going to do that again. And so it's much easier to just like document and be authentic than it is to act. And I think so many people think when they try to build an influence online, they need this facade of like, I am already a millionaire. I am rich, I am successful. And they build this facade. And really it's, a glass house at the end of the day. And if you are just transparent and honest from the get-go, there's really nothing to hide. No. There's nothing to expose, And so I think that's what people like. That's the comment I love hearing the most on my YouTube channel is like, wow, this is really just an average guy. Like I'm just an average guy. I live in an average house and I just make videos that are, objectively helpful to some people. I'm not pretending to be a millionaire or a guru and things like that. Like I am just an average guy making videos. And I think that's what inspires people so much about me is that anybody could be me. I'm not a superhero,
Yeah. Totally, man. And that's so good. That's why we're so aligned, because it's so similar to my own story. Obviously, I'm an electrician as well, featured in Forbes magazine. It's just, I totally get what you're saying. It's incredible. So I've known you for a few years, and one of the things I've seen you over the time is you went into doing a lot more education, and you was producing courses, and you was producing, you had staff, and you kind of went down the route of business and building a business and all the rest of it. And what I've seen you do is I've seen you shift your mindset and focus towards passivity and leverage. Right. So digital assets for leverage and YouTube in the form of YouTube and, affiliate income. And what I see people all the time say that passive income doesn't exist. And I think that's crazy. I think, I think you'd agree that's crazy. Having a definition of passive income is important so that you can define that it takes this much time to generate income. And I define that as being passive. However, it certainly does exist. I mean, you ask my family how we live and they'll tell you. But I think you have to be careful with the gurus out there and the big influencers saying that there's no such thing as passive income, because really you can be really good at business, but just not know how to generate passive income. You don't know how to invest your money so that it generates passive income. And I think you have to be careful you listen to there. But what would you say to made you shift from, going after that route and becoming more free and chasing time and less money over passivity, for passivity over building an empire and everything?
Yeah, so a couple of things. First of all, it just didn't align with my values. Like, if I was basically what Jason is talking about, I was going down the route of producing a course. I do still sell courses. It's a very small piece of my business now, but I was trying to go down that route of making this big course, building this whole online academy, running paid advertisements, kind of the flashy, hey, look what I've done, look at me type thing. And that required a lot of resources. It required bringing on staff. It required all kinds of complicated back and forth stuff like autoresponders and email marketing and all this stuff, and this big investment in like this digital infrastructure. And I was going down that road, but I just knew, like, at my core, like, I'm trying to sit down and like record these ads of like, because like at the time I had a Nissan GTR, which was a pretty cool car. And I'm filming a video in front of my car going like, hey, I used to work this 9 to 5. Now I drive this car. And like, as I'm doing that, I'm like, man, this is just not me. Yeah. And like, I felt like I was acting, and like I said, you don't want to act. That's not cool. And while that is all true, while I did used to work that job and now I'm driving this car, I don't know, it just didn't align with my values. And so kind of more or less scrapped that. I like built it up and then I brought it back in. Like I had a bunch of people working for me, helping me with, managing my social media accounts. And I was uploading 3 times a week and I was trying to be omnipresent across all these social media platforms. But then I realized I don't want to try to like build myself up as this, guru or anything like that. And nothing against people who do. Like, I buy courses all the time. Like, I see these people, men and women online, and I follow their story and I say, that's awesome. And I go out there and I buy that course. And generally, most of them are pretty good and I learn new skills, So like, there's nothing wrong with that business, in my opinion, at all. As long as you're genuine and you're not, misleading people. All that I felt is like, that's just didn't really align with me and what I wanted to do. So number one, that was the first reason. Second of all, managing that was a lot of effort, managing a bunch of people who all manage something else and keeping track of all of these communication mediums. It was just too much. And I was like, this is way too freaking complicated. Like, there's too many moving pieces here and I just don't like it. And so I, at the time, actually was reading the book, The 4-Hour Workweek, which is, again, such a pivotal book for entrepreneurs. And I came across the 80-20 rule. And I started went crazy with the 80-20 rule. I was like, let me apply this to literally every aspect of my entire business. And I literally carved it, like I trimmed all the fat. I got rid of entire communications. I got rid of entire platforms I was trying to build on, stripped it down to what do I enjoy and what's working. And now, like, literally my business, like what I do in a given week, I try to do 1 video per week. Sometimes I'll do 2. I manage the blog that I co-own, which means basically my part of that is I'm the gatekeeper before articles get posted. I read through them and proofread them and make sure they look good. All the other stuff is handled by the team. And I do stuff like this. I do a lot of PR and jumping on podcasts and interviews. And I manage my emails. And I only manage my main email. So like, I don't do much at all. On a given week, I probably work 15 to 20 hours per week. But that, for me, that's what I like, because my freedom is just way more valuable to me than doubling or tripling my income or my social media. For what? you know, and that's what I keep coming back to, is like, I have gotten to that point where, you know, if I want something, I can go get it. Whatever, if it's something within reason. I mean, I'm not saying I can go buy a private jet, but like, if I wanted the new Apple Watch or the new iPhone, I can go get that. But I know that that's not going to increase my level of happiness by anything at all, other than just a temporary rush. And so to me, I've reached this level where I've built up enough assets where, you know, I'm deriving a lot of income passively from those assets, and I have a big safety net in place. And, you know, I house hack, so my expenses are still relatively low. And so I'm kind of like, yeah, sure, I could go out there and, you know, do the whole dog and pony show and sell courses, but for what? Like, sure, that's going to double my income, but it's going to double my stress, and it's going to take away from my free time. And the net result there is no real increase on my happiness.
And loss of creativity,
right,
and loss of like vitality and everything.
Yeah.
Right?
And so I instead focus on the most passive part of my business, which is the affiliate marketing. And that's basically what I enjoy doing the most. And what I love about that business too is that I just consider myself to be somebody who just passes on leads. You know, I do videos about brokerage accounts. I do comparison content, or I'm sorry, my writers do the comparison content on the blog, and then I oversee that. I don't do the writing myself much anymore. But I help people on that customer journey, and I literally just take that lead and I pass it over to Robinhood, or I pass it over to M1 Finance, and they manage that customer. They handle the customer service. They offer the product. I don't do anything. I hand them a lead. They write me a check, and that's the end of our relationship. And again, I haven't said this yet, but I say this all the time in interviews. You know, affiliate marketing tends to get a bad name about it, because there are a lot of people out there that just shill products and they don't care what they're recommending.
Anything. Yeah.
Anything under the sun.
Yeah.
But
there's a program called Geordie Shore, where it's like, you know, a bunch of people on a beach all having sex with each other. And there's girls on Instagram from that program advertising Forex trading, like just to get broker commissions and things like that.
Really?
That's the kind of thing, right?
Yep. That's exactly it. You have a lot of people that are unethical affiliate marketers, where they're saying, hey, this is a stranger on the internet. I don't give a shit. You know, if they end up, you know, losing a bunch of money or getting scammed, I don't care as long as I'm getting paid. That's unethical, probably illegal too. At some point, you'll get in trouble with that if you're recommending something that's a legit scam. So my rule of thumb with anything I do is I would never recommend something online that I wouldn't recommend to my neighbor. You know, because here's the thing, I'm going to see my neighbor every day at the mailbox, or, you know, when I'm doing something in my yard. And if I scam my neighbor, you better bet he's going to come over here and say, hey, what the hell's the matter with you? Yeah. And so that's why I consider myself to be an ethical affiliate marketer, because I would not recommend something to anyone online. I don't care if they're, you know, 3,000 miles away. I still act as if that's my neighbor. And I would not recommend things that I don't use myself. Because again, too, pretty much everything I recommend, I literally use myself. So
and you're so honest about it anyway. You're telling people every time, right? And you've done most of the research on it, and you've given transparent YouTube videos on reviews and things like that. And from an investor's mindset, from a long-term investor's mindset, it's no different from Benjamin Graham saying, "Don't invest in a company that you wouldn't want to own part of truly for 10 years," right? And it's the same thing. So really important. You know, first of all, I've got, you know, the value of you being on this podcast. I think you're a real great fit for the whole message that we're putting out here. I think there's a lot of people resonating with what we just said, because in particular right now, I think people's minds have shifted going through the pandemic and going through lockdown, and almost experiencing a feeling of financial freedom, because they're being paid a check by the government. They're getting up every day and choosing what they do. They've narrowed down their expenses. There's no one to show off to, because they can't leave their house. So it's wow, this is really what it's like. This is what's important, right? And they've got this prosperity that they didn't have before. Now they're thinking about going back to work. So the things I got from you is cash buffer, cash cushions, right? Understand that you need to be rewarded. So you need to pay for your lifestyle somehow. You're going to need fulfillment, which you do in the videos and the blogs and the transparency and giving value to people. And passivity, you get rewarded from your affiliate income, which is unfulfilling, but rewarding, right?
Right.
And the whole thing is you're doing what you love. You love money. You've loved it from a young age. It's very clear. And that is really the principles of being always free. Do what you love, get rewarded for it, and provide value and be fulfilled. That is it in a nutshell. So just to finish off, tell us a little bit about first of all, is there anything that you see people going wrong with before I get to the last question? So you've worked with a lot of people and you've got a lot of comments over the years. I think you've got 700,000 YouTube subscribers?
So it's approaching that now. Yeah.
So what is the common things or the traps or the rabbit holes that you see people going into that you would absolutely say, stop?
I mean, unpopular opinion here, but maybe unpopular, but starting a physical business seems insane to me right now. Like, I have a lot of friends of mine who have like a brick and mortar business, and it's a different world. I mean, this online stuff is so different. If you're going to start a business, I mean, unless you're of like, let's say you're, passionate about, even then, if you're passionate about, bartending, still figure out how to do it online.
Yeah,
like I have
teach
a
people
lot of
how
friends,
to be a bartender.
Right. I have a lot of friends, like a buddy of mine. So for example, my barber, very close friend of mine, he owns part of the barber shop. He's part of the business. And like, he works like a dog. He works like 55, 60 hours a week at the barber shop. Then in order to make ends meet, goes and works 12 to 15 hours a week bartending. And like, I went in there the other day, and he's got a knee brace on. And I'm like, what's that? And he's like, oh, I've spent so much time standing that I tore my meniscus and now I have to get surgery. And it's like, man, that sucks. Like, I'm not saying you can't be successful with a barbershop. He probably will be once he's able to scale it and build it, but he's working a hell of a lot harder than I ever worked, you know? And so I just think with the opportunities that we have today with the internet and the way you can build these super lean businesses, like, unless you have this burning desire to own a business, I just think I would never do it. I look at these guys and I look at these restaurants that opened this year and then got hit with the shutdown. Like, oh my gosh, I feel really bad for these people. I really do. I'm sure some are successful, but I think it's a heck of a lot harder and the success rate is lower versus building a low to no overhead business online, many of which require little to no upfront capital investment, literally just the investment of your time.
Yeah, people are going to think that we've framed this question because we literally talk about this all the time. I've just literally did a module on online business and how evolved it is and efficient it is and profitable it is and leveraged it is compared to, all of the bricks and mortar and people opening a business and getting a loan to go and get business cards and brochures and all that kind of crazy stuff that no one cares about. And what I would say with that is a lot of it comes from looking up to peers and looking at a generation that is not relevant to how we do business now. I was thinking today, like, how many times, maybe in my generation in particular, your parents would tell you, when you go to pass your driving test, make sure you get a manual. You're learning a manual, right? A stick, as you call it in the US, because then you can drive both. But that's just because they learned in a manual, and obviously automatic cars were already around then. Now it doesn't make sense to drive a manual because we're going we're going auto drive, right? So just that, I mean, don't listen to people because they're just basing their opinion on what worked in that period of time. And when you subordinate to your parents, I think it's the worst thing you can do in business. So
yeah, I completely agree with that. And like, it reminds me too of like something I run into all the time with probably like people who are like 40 and above. Like, I'm going to tell them they'll be like, hey, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm heading to New Jersey. They'll be like, oh, what route are you taking? And I'm like, I have no idea. I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to open up Apple Maps and I'm going to put New Jersey in there and I'm going to follow that map. And then they go down this 10-minute conversation of the roads and all of the, you got to take 90 and then go over to 4. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't even know 3 of the streets. I know 3 streets. Like the one I grew up on, the one I live on now. I was like, I don't keep track of this stuff. And they always are like, well, you never know. Your phone could, go out of service. And it's like, well, it has yet to happen. And I'm sure there is some, truth to that, where you should have a general idea of your bearings, but it's like that old school of thought. For them, if they went somewhere, they would have to break out the map, highlight their route, and now that's just not something we need to be doing anymore. And it's generally not beneficial. You might end up in a pinch once in a while, but just super unnecessary activity now of planning out a route on paper.
Yeah. Really good advice. Really good advice. And if you want to hear more about that particular business session and business lessons, go and listen to episode 19 of this podcast, because I did speak about that in detail in that episode. So just before we go, first of all, Ryan, thanks for coming on, mate. It's been really good to catch up with you again. I want to ask you one more question, and that is, if you was like cashing out on life tomorrow, and you'd done your bit, and you got your passive investments, and you've built up a legacy of income, and you've got all your family around you, and you're about to cash out, and you can just happily rest in peace, what would be a couple of bits of advice or one thing that you would share with everyone and say, look, if you just do this, everything will be better?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, thank you so much for having me on, Jason. I really enjoy doing these podcasts, and it's always great catching up with you. In so many ways, like in so many areas of my life, what I would say is like, take some risks, and I grew up very risk averse based on, my dad was a financial advisor. Yeah. So what did he do all day? He sat and he looked at risk reward, and he put people on that chart based on their goals. And so he was very risk averse and would read about the market and crashes. That's what his job was to pad people and talk them off the ledge when there was a market downturn. So he was just programmed to that risk averse nature. And I picked that up from him. Not to mention as well, on my dad's side, both of my grandparents were handicapped. So they were kind of like, they never fit in. And so like, I think what they instilled in my father is, you just fit in, at all costs, just try to fit in, because they were always kind of outliers based on their circumstances, which, sucked. And so I think for me, I had that upbringing of fit the mold, don't take any risks based on that, mostly from my dad's side. And in so many areas of your life, like take some calculated risks. Like I was writing a letter to one of my younger cousins who graduated this year from high school, and I wanted to give him 3 pieces of advice. And one of them, I don't remember the other 2, but one of them was, I said, don't be afraid to take risks as long as you don't get arrested. Like that's pretty much my mindset. It's like, hey, if you're going to get arrested, you probably shouldn't do it, because we have the societal structure and there's things we should and shouldn't do. But if you're going to get a scraped knee, or, you're going to embarrass yourself, so what? So whether it's, a business, whether it's a pretty girl that you see at a coffee shop or a bar, whether it's whatever it is, take some risks in life, and, don't be so risk averse that you end up missing out.
Great advice. Really, really good advice. That is some great advice. And that's probably something that would be on my list as well.
Glad to hear it.
Well, mate, it's been great having you on. Just before you head off, tell everyone where they can find you. I know you mentioned your YouTube channel earlier, but if you've got a blog, or just announce the site, because this is a raw edit. This is not getting edited or anything. It's just going up straight. So go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, if you want to watch my YouTube videos, which is more related to the finance stuff, like how to build credit and things like that, or the basics of the stock market, that's just, Ryan Scribner on YouTube. If you are looking to get into investing and you want to learn about different brokerage accounts, or how to get started, or some of these different investing platforms, the blog I co-own is investingsimple.com. Or if you just want to do some snooping and say, what the heck is this guy doing, to make money, you can check those out. And then I always offer this as well on interviews. If you have a personal question for me, if you jump over to my Instagram, shoot me a DM, just say, hey, I listened to you on the Always Free podcast with Jason or whatever. Here's my question. I always will do my best to answer those questions, since you've already taken your time here and invested it in me, and, sat and listened to this podcast. So I always prioritize DMs like that.
Amazing. Well, listen, Ryan, thanks again for coming on, mate, and we'll catch up soon when we're allowed out.
Sounds good. All right.
So, guys, hope you've enjoyed that. Until next week, have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you then.
For news on all future events and updates, go to jasongraystone.com.